The Radio Wammo Breakfast.
Live from the New Scientist Labs, Janine Young, newscientist.com.
Joining us from Melbourne City, St Kilda, in fact, with her new laboratory in the background, it is Janine Young. Hello to you, Janine.
Good morning. It's actually Port Melbourne. St Kilda's behind me.
Oh, St Kilda's behind you, right. Port Melbourne, lovely anyway. Very, very nice. You're showing me a nice view out the window before, which I really appreciated.
It's a bit different than a blank wall, yes.
Indeed. A couple of great topics today. First up, does music transcend race and culture?
Maybe. There's never a definitive answer when we talk about these things. I'm never able to say yes or no, and it frustrates me as well. Over however many millennia, people have been wondering whether music does in fact transcend culture and language, and whether or not it's an evolutionary adaptation that we've picked up because, it's a type of other social glue. We don't know at this point, but researchers are certainly looking at how music is put together and how humans respond to it. There tends to be a bit of a Western-centric view that so-called consonant or nice-sounding frequencies together, because ultimately music is mathematically based. You have frequencies and the like. So, say a string has a frequency of 1.
Yeah.
An octave tends to be a 2, so you have twice the frequency. Now, generally, that sounds quite pleasing to Western ears, and while most musicians across the world do work on octaves, and also a thing called the perfect fifth, C and perhaps a G above it, for example, not all cultures do. There's some people who think that Chinese opera is the equivalent of hell because they don't have this nice... Yeah, I had a friend who did it once and came home slightly mentally disturbed because it just hit his head in. Now, I'm not meaning to have a go at Chinese opera, but it is a completely different sound.
Yeah.
A lot of Indian music can be the same. A lot of cultures don't use the same basis that we do.
Yeah.
So this very Western-centric idea has been that, these lovely consonant sounds where we've got major scales and all that is normal, and the human body and human brain is attuned naturally to liking these kinds of noises. Well, yeah, we're not entirely sure about that. Experiments over the years, monkeys, actually, although what monkeys have to do with humans liking music, I think is a little tenuous, but they said, okay, well, you have a choice of listening to consonant or dissonant, so
Yep.
these slightly off sounds, and the monkeys really didn't care which one it was. Their only preference was really that it was not that loud. So that probably tells us more about monkeys than it does about humans.
Yeah.
But in looking at 6 to 9 month old babies, because they, are not meant to have learnt anything in our culture and the like, they found that they tend to notice, and that's all you can actually do with babies because you can't tell what they like, they notice these major consonant chords. They're able to pick the difference a lot better than, say, the dissonant ones. Now, the problem is that babies can still learn a whole bunch of cultural stuff even in the womb. They're incredibly sensitive to sensory information. They can recognise their mother's voices by the time they're born.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily a good idea. But even little tiny babies who are 2 days old born to deaf parents that are likely not to have heard a great deal of music in the time they were being conceived and hatched and all that sort of stuff, even they responded slightly better to the consonant sounds, but there's no way that you can pick out the cultural aspects of that.
But there generally would be this idea that, as you say, that there is a chord, I suppose, that can be struck between all races and cultures, a similar liking and a similar understanding of music.
Basically, the thing about all cultures is that they have some form of music, and it is generally for significant occasions like weddings and funerals. They often have a particular type of music that's associated with children.
Yeah.
And generally things like tempo can give away whether or not it's a happy or a sad song. So there are some things that are relatively universal across music, but when it comes to tonality, it certainly isn't.
Yeah.
When a bunch of I think it was Cameroonians, were asked to listen to a particular type of Western music, they were able to pick up whether or not it was a happy or a sad song without really knowing what's going on. So means that we do have some kind of innate ability to pick whether or not a song is happy or sad, and that's partially by tempo, but it's also partially by the tones that are used.
Okay, well, we'll finish on Google, and I think everyone is familiar with Google Street View and how that works. And some might have even seen the Google cars come around and take photos of their streets where they live. But it turns out that Google were doing a lot more than just taking photos, Janine.
And they were also taking information to do with the Wi-Fi networks in the area. They were taking the network's names, locations, and the unique MAC addresses of the routers that support them. Now, a few privacy commissioners have gotten a bit upset about this, because that information, while it is available, shouldn't necessarily be harvested. Certainly the German and the British privacy commissioners have said, well, they didn't mention that to us when they were asking permission to take photographs of Street View. And they haven't outlined what the implications of a leak from that database might be. But they are concerned that it wasn't disclosed in the first place. You can still lie by omission. And Google has recently said, yeah, maybe we should have said something about that. You know, all this information is publicly available. You know, we've never said that we're going to do anything with it. But it's all about making sure that your smartphone can actually pinpoint where you are more accurately. And Google using that as their justification.
So when they cruised past my house, they took the information from my wireless router at home and whatever it was broadcasting, whatever the name of the broadcast was. And they also got the IP addresses, and you just say MAC addresses, which are the unique identifiers for that particular router, and potentially the computers on it as well?
They haven't said anything about whether or not the computers on it were being taken as well, but certainly the locations and the MAC addresses were involved. Now, the implications of this for privacy, it's unclear at this point precisely what this information would be used for, because fundamentally it is meant to make things more accurate for the smartphones that are actually picking this up. And indeed, it works. You know, it's making a really big difference. But at what price? What information do we have to give away in order to know where we are? And this is the fundamental question that, Google has been accused of not taking privacy very seriously before now. And it's just another accusation along those lines, really.
Yeah. Janine Young, thanks very much. You'll find those stories in the New Scientist magazine, which comes out next week. And we'll catch you next week, Janine.
See you later.